Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon is simultaneously one of the most fire games I've ever played and one of the most unbalanced messes ever spilled. Or is it? Yes, gamers, today we're diving face first into the current final Pokemon Mystery Dungeon game, and arguably the best one at that. From massive gameplay refinements to a very linearized experience with finite amounts of content bogged down by other drags that taint the game's reputation. Leave it up to me to dissect this beast in order to find out how good, potentially bad, the game is. Yeah, that just covers it for the intro. Let's not sit here and waste any time. Let's just hop right into this and give Super Mystery Dungeon its fair trial. Kicking off the gameplay section, we've got to quickly sprint across the line of the overworld because, yeah, things are of course different. Once again, we're given a new hub world, but this time, massive and segmented. Your movement's still very free with the circle pads greater than D-pad movement, but this time, the world is vast. With 2 hub areas at first, you already know it's cool, neat even, but then, with story progress, you soil your trousers at the sight of 4 entire other hub worlds to follow. Great in making the game have scale, but pretty obnoxious when each individual continent has their own lineup of dungeons, only accessible from there specifically. Hurt even further by your starting point always being on one specific one of the 5 continents. While we get a workaround, it's something we've got to come back to later because the game needs proper progression first. Regardless, all overworld exploration leaves us with at this point is the change to saving. While available everywhere, it's only a lie, as for some reason, saving can just no longer be performed at dungeon midpoints. You know, the most important place to even ever save the game. Traded out for saving mid-dungeon through an item, which wasn't really worth killing it off for. You want to use it optimally, you gotta look it up in advance for optimal save points. That's not really ideal. So yeah, that just about does it for overworld nonsense. It's nothing groundbreaking, just some minor saving fumbles. That's it. But here with our gameplay transition, we get to see a massive overhaul, both for better and even better. Departing the station is a mostly course correction to address how taxing Gates to Infinity was to play through at times. At least as far as the main game, and a lot of others are concerned, the dungeon generation is much more tame. The floor sizes have been cut down a bit. We actually have off paths granted from water or lava now, encouraging to use mons that can traverse it, and of course general fun can finally be had. While some dungeons can still feel a bit bland with some Gates-like dungeon generation with the repetitive structures that somehow make simple boxes look appealing, and potentially but rarely the size too, they're very little in supply and nowhere near as ball-breaking as they were before. All in all, dungeon going has finally been improved to be enjoyable once again. Again, most of the time. That's the simple stuff. Mechanically though, big things are on the horizon. As such, we begin with shoving, where before your only real partner interactions was just simply swapping tiles with them, here you're given access to the shove. For allies, this just requires you to walk into them, where swapping tiles now needs you to hold B. Shoving allies serves to be a great positioning tool, allowing you to put your partners into attacking range, or even serving as a means to force your way out of a monster house rather than leaving some teammate to die helplessly. Regardless of how, it's a potentially invaluable tool to allow you more options on how to approach enemy encounters. Unfortunately, in this regard of useful movement attack, that leaves us with just one, being the alliance attack. Overriding the Gates team attack, this odd addition exists to reward playing with allies once again, this time in a menu to lock in certain attacks, where in front of a foe, you launch all the attacks granted that your teammates are nearby to surround the enemy, for a massive burst of damage, or utility at the cost of a little bit of hunger, like the previously mentioned shoving cost. Exceedingly useful due to ignoring type resistances, but even more busted through the movement attack that is simply jumping your teammates around the foe. While it seems like, and frankly is a bit overtuned due to the downside of being minimal, the fact some foes are capable of using alliance attacks will be scaring the shit back into you should you get too comfortable. While we're on the topic of attacks, the attack leveling system returns, surprisingly addressed as well. Notably different is the growth of attacks when used, just earning noticeably less move XP across the board, meaning all the extra status that you would earn from level up just takes far longer to earn, backed even further as attacks now have specifically chosen caps regarding their damage and PP values, where accuracy already depended on the attack. Now the attack's max PP and damage depend as well, allowing even the worst attacks a means to stand out, as the best ones are no longer being rewarded even further, instead of cannibalizing damn near most attacks in the game, being a positive despite the even more daunting level grind that makes hitting the number attached less reasonable, with you likely in favor of the shortcuts instead. In terms of new mons mechanics, we finally have the main series speed stat in this game. It only really affects hit rates and a couple of attacks that are hardly worth mentioning, but it's new so we had to. Unlike the next returning feature that actually has proper gameplay changes now, as a gigantic Pokemon, like in the first two PMD games, has team building restrictions. Of course with the catch of only one ever being able to tag along on a mission. In Dungeon, however, the differences lay with several big details. The elephant in the room of the Pokemon now taking up 9 tiles on a 3x3 basis versus the standard 1, making for a much larger target. In return, they're given much more generous range with attacks, and a small lineup of them have their range offerings completely modified from that of normal mons. Benefits and drawbacks don't stop there, as moving around is just gonna be a bit awkward. In terms of hallways alone, the mon is centered within its middle tile. Typically 3 tiles will be active at once, but of course more can too, with the primary fear just being big range attacks being a bit of a problem. And as a team, they'll frequently cause small gaps among your adjacent allies within corridors. Made extra aggravating as in general to swap tiles with them, they'll end up warping around to a nearby tile in a semi-unreliable manner, potentially multiple times if you want to get around them. Yeah, not only is positioning weird, it's kind of slow, creating a weird trade-off where giant Pokemons have clear strengths and weaknesses that make running them kind of questionable at times. Up next, we finally have a semi-effective way to make the IQ skills not suck as a mechanic, and that was to just kind of delete them. Well, that's technically untrue, as we've got 2 new innate abilities to your allies that can't really be turned off, as allies can now sometimes wake you up, unreliably so, alongside all allies being able to redirect attacks to them. That's the close to IQ skill features that are built in. Everything else that exists is stuck in the Looplets and Amera's feature. Yeah, sadly we gotta have a dedicated section to held items, but with extra steps, as the Looplets are held and essentially replace every previous held item for some reason. Each of these come packed with notches to insert the Amera items. These are essentially the IQ skill effects with a vast variety to go around. The catch is they need to be inserted into an equipped Looplet to take effect, resetting after every dungeon, maintained through checkpoints. Almost like they finally remembered that this game is supposed to have roguelike elements, like the way more punishing deaths through guaranteed bag and money wipes. So here, this is kinda good. The Ameras themselves are like standard items, but they'll explode before you walk onto them through a turn timer. So you just gotta hope to speed on over to them or have a foe grab it. That's why you're just stuck with puddles that, when collected, eventually will add up to a random Amera. While foes can technically take use of these effects, it's very unlikely, granted they gotta find a Looplet with the Amera actually equipped in the first place, meaning you'll realistically be the only one taking advantage of these massive power bumps to your abilities, which seems troublesome at first until we reach the game's difficulty and see the game actually balance around their presence. The big thing the Ameras can unlock, however, outside of the temporary stat boosts and other forms of performance enhancement, is access to Mega Evolution with the Awakening system. Both come to bat through the equipping of a single Amera. This system provides a temporary status that gives the affected mon a notable power boost and an attack immunity from frontward facing attacks, alongside the benefits of Mega Evolving if the Pokemon can, all for a limited time, counting up from the gauge on the bottom screen that charges from battling or walking. The Mega Evolved Pokemon also come at a bit of a downside, as once the gauge caps out, they'll enter an uncontrollable berserk mode that'll wander around and potentially kill your own team or nearby foes, likely coming from the Giga buff's regular attack. All of these factors blend together in a means that makes Awakenings kind of difficult to use, as the main skill is just timing it for the actual value and to avoid the sometimes difficult to time berserk effect that could be both good or bad for you. Where at the end of the day, we're left with a fun, highly customizable system that adds flair to just about any run of a dungeon that was essentially the cause of death of the IQ skill system, which grinding for those was nothing short of a miserable time sink. Our next changes are pretty controversial to say the least, as if that last one wasn't. Seen in the team builder. Once unlocked, it's accessible from the overworld menu and the dungeon departure screen for far easier use, being convenient and available pretty much anywhere. Teams this time can be built into your own presets, so you can save the time of needing to rebuild them later, since you can always see these when departing, and you never have to rebuild the team after. It's worth noting that team positioning in the 3 slots will actually matter. As sure, the leader change mechanic does exist outside of story dungeons as a simple button press. However, doing so specifically fails to change the order of an alliance attack, potentially throwing away certain setup if you need it specifically before your other attacks, as the 1, 2, 3 order is always what it will follow, so the exact order you build the team in. Another positive little thing to note here is that sometimes for each in-game day, you will be given a random team of motivated Pokemon. These mons, when deployed for that day, will earn triple XP and still more than average if left undeployed. Yep, that's just about it. A lineup of mons who will earn more XP if used. It's not too much to get excited about. Unless it's Unknown, baby, where they'll grant everyone a 2x multiplier, taking dead weight and making it the most rewarding RNG chance possible. possible. Although with all these positives, we got the issue that technically is good, but technically bad, technically someone trying to peel your skin off with the days off thing, because simple team building like this couldn't just be so easy. Now, for some reason, your teammates can just say, no, and simply be unavailable for a given in-game day, which simply prevents you from bringing them into dungeons, with little rhyme and reason to it. Thankfully, with you and your partner exempt, typically, but not always, achieving the goal of preventing you from bringing mons to multiple maps in a row. But in actuality, the shit just feels random since it just picks mons you don't even bring, and it has a bad habit of putting them out of commission for multiple days. This is supposed to encourage team building, fumbling primarily for two reasons. One, the fact you have to sit here and build a new team if someone's unavailable. Detrimental, as it's already hindering the use of making multiple teams with the presets. But of course, it's not helped by the fact you're going to have to dig through a long list of mons to fix the issue. The secondary reason just being the time investment to fix your ally's non-functional movesets, frequently so with the bonus ally nonsense to boot, which leads to this variety booster in the team building department just being an annoying time sink to not intentionally handicap yourself for being too lazy to fix the movesets on your less desirable allies. A piece of the catalyst in this battle is the updated leveling system. Just like in Gates, whenever EXP is earned, your undeployed mons will still earn EXP from the bench, obviously allowing them to keep up with the game's story progression, especially as the story dungeons will always have your extra recruited mons banned from use, while letting them actually do things in post-game from not being pitifully underleveled. The difference from Gates is that all levels earned are now automatically applied, meaning no more level text and the double-edged sword of auto-skipping level up moves gained off screen. That'll of course always have to be taught later, an issue due to the game's new recruitment features and just how many you gain as a result. Generally, the change is good, but again, with the game encouraging the use of so many different Pokemon, it can be a time sink in fixing move pools as a massive downside. Since we're talking about leveling, that's a good transition to evolution. With Super, we go back to basics here as it's accessed from an in-game location, blocking its use once again for post-game and for your main two characters delayed until after the post-game story. With Super, this irreversible decision is streamlined even further in this game because the requirements for evolution are simplified to an absurd degree. Basically, ask yourself this: does the Pokemon evolve from level up? If yes, then level that damn thing up. Elsewise, you can just evolve it off rip, no gimmicks attached. Simplified to remove all item fetching nonsense that made the older games a bit annoying to evolve in. There is a little bit more to talk about with evolution, but we have to come back to that later. Something improved far more is surprisingly the conditions for game overing being far less restrictive and generally more forgiving. Starting with the main story run, you'll notice several bits of forgiveness instantly. Oh, did your main partner die during a story dungeon? Well, that's actually fine. It's not game over material. The game also just lets you bring in more than the standard 3 mons into dungeons during certain story bits and random escort missions, both of which can actually faint in dungeons, and things will continue just fine. With the one drawback of the mon warping somewhere else, needing a reviver seed to get picked back up. Massive for mission escorts since they get warped away from danger and stay dead, meaning it's only going to cost you a single reviver seed and not any more due to horrible positioning, and without a game over on top. But wait, we're still not even done yet, as now for random non-story dungeons, if you manage to fall and there are still partners standing, you're instantly swapped to another partner instead of game overing. All of these help the game hit a needed position where one RNG check won't instantly end the game. Those checks in question being something like a random ally slipping away for some reason, which granted certain gameplay mechanics is always going to lurk around as an issue, even in spite of our next note, the game having much better AI, from them going out of their way to grab items, to even prioritizing actual good positioning to take on foes. Their lethality is going to be much more blatant this time around. Important to note, as foes also have this battle AI, and let's just say stalemates are a lot more common than you'd hope. But it can't stop there, because foes, if possible, love taking free opportunities to set up should you not approach, and entering rooms are even greater death traps than thought before, granted how much more aggressive the foes are at a distance. Where the game gets easier, the game gets harder. Our next change is way off topic and actually kind of minuscule. I never even noticed it during the gameplay, but hey, we have a course correction from Gates once again, this time with weather. You can regenerate HP in sun and rain now. Fun! Lastly, for our gameplay mechanics, we've got the completely reworked mission system with the connection orb. Oh, you want to talk about controversial? We've got it here, as this is both the system for the game's jobs and the game's recruitment system at the same time. Here you're shown and take note of every single mon across the world and their connections. Some Pokemon have missions for you to take on, and thank goodness, you can actually do multiple at once in this game. The jobs in question take the form of simple rescues, item retrievals, mini-boss fights, team fights, Pokemon meetups that could be monster houses, escorts in some variation of these, sealed door escorts, item deliveries, meetups, actual boss battles, and full dungeon explorations as your acceptable lineup. While some missions can be accepted without a connection, and plenty are gated behind the team ranks, most of them will require you to recruit a mon connected to them, creating some kind of funnel and sense of progression. As far as rewards go, there are secondary rewards that exist sometimes on a small lineup of missions. They hardly matter, and we'll have to talk about them briefly later, but the primary reward is always the involved Pokemon, and potentially others for free just because. Since there's a limited supply of Pokemon, that will mean there is a finite supply of content in the game. That no, the treasure collection doesn't really patch up. Hurting that supply more is mons that'll join you just from simply talking to them for some free easy recruits. And the traveling mons you just gotta hope to luck into mid-dungeon, with the only form of tracking them being available when you have no jobs left remaining without knowing prior who they are or if they even have progression tied to them in the first place. Then there's others who aren't tracked in the orb or even the dungeon list at all that you just have to know about. Fine. All of this ends up complicating the job system quite a bit, but don't worry, another worsening on this feature is the fact that you have to come into this mess of a menu to favorite your Pokemon, to help them at least stand out among the bloat with no other means to do so. But hey, for the sake of convenience, it's all stuck in a menu. So you know, maybe the change to the system isn't the worst thing in the world. And that, gamers, is the new and updated that makes super different, and a lot of the wrinkles that roll over into the PMD1 remake that follow. But that's all for mechanics, so now the playthrough and replayability factors. Dumping our paint in the can called the Super Experience, we begin with the obvious being the Pokemon lineup. After the pitiful showing from Gates, we hit a return to form that is simply jaw-dropping. Up to Gen 6, we've got 721 different Pokemon, and this game comes just short at 720 because what even is a Volcanion anyways? Just about everything possible is here for fantastic variety, and there's somehow more, as we, for some reason in the recruitment pool, have 67 random duplicates, weird as the alternate forms are fair and obvious inclusions, but it's odd as for some reason a few Pokemon just have duplicates in the pool that are representing their gender differences. This isn't like the two different versions of Meowstic having different traits. It's here's a Venusaur and then here's another one, with no gameplay difference needed, almost just being selective favoritism. Add all of these together for 787 total recruitables alongside your two main characters for 789 mons potentially for you to own. And that's all the mons you get, period. Since every mon is recruited through the connection orb, you, like with the missions, have a finite amount of mon to grab. You can never grab duplicates outside of that very small pool, and by the end, every single individual Pokemon will always be guaranteed recruited. And that is without the needs for evolution. It ends up as a problem since your mons are limited, and you already have the evolution, so there is zero incentive to ever use the feature to evolve in the first place. As not only can you never get those unevolved forms back, but not everything is even capable of evolution in the first place. Mostly just being story relevant mons alongside some random glub shittos, meaning evolving even everyone isn't an option. Sadly, this ends up leaving evolution to only really be useful for your main duo and not much more. I mean, if you really wanted 7 different Blazikens, then nobody's gonna stop you, but that's just 2 whole mons that you've potentially locked yourself out of permanently. God forbid you want to spread it to more. And finally, for the playables, we've got the starters, your 2 characters with the most privilege across the whole game. And when it comes to selecting them this time, we get the best of both worlds experience from previous titles. Both a personality test that directly lies to your face, and the option to refuse the game's pick, so you could just be whatever starter you want. And the best part, it's you having freedom of choice over the game's 20 starter options. Of course, tied with what Explores the Sky brought us prior. Undoubtedly being a good footnote because both choice and variety are nothing short of fantastic. Luckily, that just about does it for the count, so let's see the oddities as there's quite a few to note. First, with the forms, since not all mons got standalone versions for them, and we care about those with shreds of gameplay impact. Shaman and Meloetta being picked when entering a dungeon, although Meloetta and Keldeo do need their signature attack to do so. Genesect, Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus picked in a team builder, where Deoxys, Giratina, and Kyurem will switch out their forms after use, with that last one needing to be unlocked, leaving those last 3 to be a bit inconvenient when you want to play around with the alternate forms, where all the others are at least well handled. Unlike the chaos of the Pokemon that works completely different to all else with Hoopa. Yes, he has his own gameplay mechanics, because instead of being a simple selectable teammate from the team builder, this one's gotta be a chore tied to an item. One that you have to go find on the sand continent daily in order to have a teammate that you can smuggle past that 3 team member limit. To once in a dungeon, have to use the bottle every single floor to keep him around, since he auto returns when moving between floors. Simply put, the issue with him is just how slow of a process it is to have an extra team member that's essentially always a positive to have on you. The other quirks attached for Hoopa is his form being chosen at random, of course, but more importantly, simply talking to him will allow Hoopa to potentially spawn legendary or mythical allies to join you for the floor. Potentially nothing or even more foes to beat up. The main reason we're even mentioning this at all. Regardless of how unreliable the summons can be, not using it still leaves you with a 4th partner that'll do nothing short of pull its weight. Regardless, that's the Pokemon stock. Gotta ask what's next, and yep, it's immediately time for the playthrough in the unfortunate reality of setting a new record for mandatory filler content in a PMD game. So let's just count it all out to map out the entire run of the game before the intricacies. So from cutting out the copious amounts of dialogue, we begin the game with Dungeon 1 and Dungeon 2 immediately, both being super tutorialized, even with the game playing it itself at times. Dungeon 3 where you go solo, Dungeon 4 finally with your partner, with the first boss attached, Dungeons 5 and 6 with little to note, outside of some partner variety, Dungeon 7 attached to boss 2, with Dungeon 8 and boss 3 to follow, where the avalanche of filler content takes fold. 8 back-to-back days to just grind the connection orb, where eventually we get to Dungeon 9 and boss 4, just to go back to the filler content gulag with 2 more days. Dungeon 10 finally comes to bat, but is cut short, being followed with 2 more days of filler, before finally a glimmer of hope. Dungeon 11 with 12 supporting from the rear, with boss 5 being oddly unattached. But with all hope, despair bounces back even stronger with 4 filler runs as a pitiful start to the second act of the game. Dungeon 13 peeks its head out to be crushed by 2 filler runs. The hope once again swings to Dungeon 14, backed by boss 6, boss 7 phase 1, and boss 7 phase 2. If you thought the boss fights were cool, you should try 4 runs of filler content. Hope again with Dungeon 15, but despair is the other side of that coin, being 1 filler run, where for some reason, some way, somehow, is never seen again because the story finally picked up its slack. Dungeon 16 is just Dungeon 10, but with the full run and the mons being noticeably stronger than before. Hell itself somehow manages to feel divine, as Dungeon 17, 18, and 19 are all back to back, with boss 8 to follow. Dungeon 20 with boss 9 piggybacking, boss 10 randomly shows up, where Dungeons 21, 22, and 23 all follow, with boss 11 here to crush your dreams. Which finally leaves Dungeons 24 and 25 at the end, where boss 11 phase 1 and phase 2 round out the main game, which gives us 11 different boss fights, 25 different dungeons, and 24 wastes of your time, almost on par with the actual story dungeons in terms of quantity. No matter, surely the post-game will carry its weight, right? Well, for that, you start partnerless with a filler run immediately, Dungeon 26 without allies, Dungeon 27 solo once again, before getting thrust into 3 runs of filler content with Mew mandatory as a teammate, where finally, Dungeon 28 for your partner to finally return, as this whole section is like Gates, good storytelling through gameplay with your partner's absence and the quest to get them back, newly starved for EXP. Oh yeah, spoiler warning by the way, giving us 3 post-game dungeons and 4 filler runs, which at this point, I can't even really be annoyed by, where both sections of the game basically end up tied in terms of filler to quality story content. Although something actually does need to be noted for the main story, and that comes to story events, as when the game wants you to go to a dungeon, that's it. You're hopping your ass on that train and going there, as the game won't let you do anything else. I mean, you can't just go off and grind more missions, and you especially can't grind for levels or extra attack levels, weirdly encouraging sticking around in dungeons after completing missions just to milk a wee bit more EXP, almost punishing you for wanting to speed through the game as fast as possible, which conveniently leads to this game's level curve, which is nothing special, primarily because the main game is constantly pelting you with non-existent EXP output that encourages you to get on your knees and beg for an unknown bonus day. Starting the game at level 5, you'd be lucky to hit level 8 by the first boss, crawling up to 12-ish when the connection orb is finally gotten, only being around 18 when the Expedition Society arc starts, where the excessive amount of filler runs may or may not cripple your levels, seeing mid-20s once you finally hit the Voidlands. And finally, upon reaching the final dungeons, about 26 to 27, hardly pushing any boundaries for endgame, where post, if played immediately, will fail to even have you at 30, but thankfully can be delayed if you really want it. But that only really covers the main duo in most recruits. The thing is, the connection orb being the way it is, can and will give you mons way above yours in level, immediately seen with the Salamence the third request will give you, being 50 immediately with several more to follow, seeming like they would be completely broken. But more so they end up as cornerstone allies guys that aren't completely capable of soloing everything for side content despite their far higher power level. Balance made more so through them taking days off. A carry, yes, but not indestructible. It'll at least make harder content more viable early on. Lastly, before the game's difficulty, we gotta have evolution piggyback to level talk, because surprisingly, it shows up a bit in the main story, although only temporary for all of about 3 boss battles, 2 dungeons, and potentially a third if the previous boss ends in an L, all for you to work with a higher power level that'll feed into our sections on the game's difficulty. But early on, the game starts pretty easy. The first 4 dungeons and Gabite are basically free, where the boss fights that follow get a bit sketchy due to the amount of foes present, but the stuff surrounding it is fairly easy. Once the connection orb is opened up, we get 2 reasonable requests before a complete disaster in balancing with Axie's request. As here, you're given an escort to beat up the Salamence. He has over 400 HP, has defenses that are far too high, and of course has access to rage so we can just start spamming one-shots that even with an escort, a potential partner, and even the ability to spam alliance attacks, you can get mowed down and you will get mowed down, and you will bow to the item spamming overlords to ever get past this nonsense. Like, it's the epitome of that meme of the boss when you fight it versus the boss when you actually use it, because items are the only way you're hopping over this hurdle as some kind of introduction to the game's item meta. As for other connection orb challenges, the solo foes that start to flee upon taking damage can be a little bit of a hassle, and of course random bosses of varying difficulty. Don't really have to explain this one, it's just hard to pace these fights out. Regardless, Giratina & Co. again has a lot of enemies, but is kind of fair. Jirachi is just a 2v1, Magmortar & Co. is a lot of foes, but items makes it plausible. Entei in both iterations is reasonable, especially phase 2 from your extra statage. The battle against the Void Shadows should be pretty easy, it's just their unique qualities as not Pokemon make them kind of annoying to deal with. You probably shouldn't lose the battle to Mega T-Tar and friends, mainly because the legendary beast should never fall in this fight. The 2v1 after is easy enough, where most of the game's dungeons are simple enough through mid-game due to all of the allies present. That's why we skipped over so many, they're fairly easy. The duo of the Submerged Cave and Prehistoric Ruins sure as hell don't abide by that, being a noticeable difficulty spike for regular dungeons that really doesn't get topped. More ally spam carries a dungeon before what honestly could have been the proper final boss. Spawning a mile away leaves Oblivion Wing to be the most tactical middle finger PMD has ever printed, when you can just start turn 2 at half health and potentially dead allies. Yveltal alone's already a pain, and that ignores the Snarl to address the obvious play of Surround or Pounce wanting him, and an extra unneeded source of healing. But goons to body block your approach as well, just make the Reviver Seed demand far higher. Fuck this fight, it's miserable, and evolution doesn't help much. Which is funny, because immediately following this obnoxious, probably one of the hardest boss fights in all of PMD, is 2 cakewalks for dungeons and whatever the final boss is supposed to be. Regarding post game, there is a noticeable difficulty spike, made much harder for those story dungeons, having you only be solo with main character alone, and other sorts of power creep that sometimes feel a bit unfair at times. Otherwise, it's all the stuff that comes after that's just all over the place. From difficulty labels that are pretty vague to specific dungeons, boss fights, or request-related tomfoolery. All of which has to be balanced around the Looplets feature for its constant ability to raise your power level, very early in dungeons too. God forbid some other crazy items that define the meta. Luckily, Reviver Seeds are in high supply in this game's second act, viable in bulk, leading to high supply of tape to put over the gashes of your skill issues or cheap tricks the game's got up its sleeve. Although not stopping there, stat items are about as accessible too if stat bowling's more of your style for reaching new heights. See, we've got solutions here. But as far as difficulty goes, there's about 2 places where it sticks out like a sore thumb, and other places where the overall power level is relevant that simply demands a much higher skill level than usual, pretty much putting you in a chokehold known as the hardest PMD game. Anyways gamers, that's the run. It's got crazy variety, a little bit longer and a more fleshed out second take at the gate's post game, done notably better. The connection orb being the way that it is leads itself to actually being a post game extension of some kind, really only held back by its prevalence during the main run. It's honestly kind of weird how well this works despite the flaws of the filler content. In terms of features to assist your runs of the game, surprisingly, there's not much this time around. At the start, we go to town with the Lapras Liner, this being the system to take you to the game's continents. Why it's here is for 2 reasons. One being the need to bypass this from Kecleon to actually get access to the other continents, but the other reason is the fact that we have a fast travel system that almost allows you to completely replace the need for Lapras. Unlocked after getting every Pokemon and visiting every dungeon in the game, the big globe in the Expedition Society building will allow you to instantly travel to any town or dungeon in the game to save time. You know, after you've done just about every drop of content in the game, which makes this very useful addition to skip all the running around, dialogue, and other nonsense to feel like a bit of a spit in the wound somehow. The deposit box returns once again to merge the simple banking and item storage together with a separate folder for treasure boxes, keeping things nice and organized. However, now we've got an addition of note. Stocking up to 100 of an item now actually grants an exchange option to get a gold bar in return, being a reason to stock up on as many filler or useless items as possible rather than trying to get rid of them, making the gold bar economy even stronger. Kecleon's shop returns yet again to the surprise of nobody to simply sell you items or to buy yours to keep the coin economy going. Like we'll see with the upcoming shops, upon recruiting a shopkeeper, the related building will actually get an upgrade with something new. For Kecleon, it's another menu of buyables, notably featuring the potential for unlimited use TMs among its lineup. Important to note because these unlimited use TMs are coming after you've done pretty much all of the game's content, actually finding a means to balance them out. Cofagrigus' gold shop also returns and is even more valuable than before. Like with Gates, you can buy money for gold or a wide variety of items. The items in question being much more approachable price-wise and more versatile in what they grant. The unlockable bonus in this shop is the wide lineup of buyable looplets that has the added bonus of restocking the treasure collection's looplets at a heavy price, should you somehow manage to lose them. The box opening store returns once again, reskinned here, ran by Klefki, spending coins opening boxes one at a time for a wide variety of items or currency. And the unlockable extra? Well, the big build up for the new feature here is the ability to simply do all boxes on you at once, as if that ever needed to be unlockable. Halucha ends up running the reskin move school, and geez, he's not here to play around. Like previous titles, you get the ability to reteach previously learned attacks for free, which with the new leveling system is going to be in very high demand. A new feature provided here is the ability to give up a single token in order to change the ability on any specific Pokemon that could potentially have more than one. So your only one recruitable version of a Mon isn't forever doomed to an ability that you don't want while remaining adaptable. For the final upgradable shop, this one's got the strongest effect of them all. With a move tutor, for a hefty amount of gold, you're able to cash them out for the shop's variety of attacks to get your Mons even greater power levels. And by that we mean teaching Heat Wave to every single fire type to exist, which gets to round out the much better lineup of integral features. For our lesser lineup, we can start with the Kangaskhan Cafe, serving as the hub for lots of potential recruits. The actual feature provided is simply getting the game's limited supply of items from rewards coming from the connection orb and not much else. The Meowth Theater was supposed to host a variety of level 5 dungeons for you to run. In actuality, it's only a line of text and nothing more, which finally leads us to the main menu features. Kicking that off is the gameplay feature of Pelipper Island. This place serves to primarily host the game's ability to have you rescue other players and even yourself, so either can continue their fallen run of a dungeon. This area even features a gate to play dungeons normally, important to derail the main game for grinding purposes, as well as hosting the main town's features just in case those goodies are desperately needed, essentially being Gates' companion mode without most of the bloat. Helpful to a far lesser degree, Wonder Mail returns to still grant obscure rewards from gathering random passcodes off the internet, as if anyone actually cared. Returning from Gates, we do have the feature that lets you rename your team and your starter Pokemon. The only reason we're mentioning this at all is because these two Mons are the only things nameable in the entire game. Yeah, nicknames as a series staple somehow got completely stomped out and is just completely unusable for your other recruits. We're mentioning it here because I couldn't find a better place to put it. Which lastly leaves us with the Jukebox. Yet again, another hub for listening to the game's many music tracks at your own leisure. The lineup starts empty and builds up with story progress, with a noticeable chunk of the game's music from prior games needing rank ups to unlock and not much else. Finally, rounding out the features lineup. Simply put, it shops and other forms of nonsense to power up your Mons or some menu nonsense. What works for gameplay is good, if not great, and the everything else is everything else. When we push towards the art direction section, I could realistically copy and paste it from Gates. As for how the music is concerned, it's good, and the vibes between the two main sections of the story stand out pretty well. Generally speaking, the overall offering, on average, makes the game notably more immersive. Shit's good, improving every scene it touches, plot and dungeon alike. The only real complaint with the soundtrack is surprisingly how much is here, particularly the returning music from Gates. Pretty much all of its dungeon music is present here, filling out the lineup of random side dungeons across the game, trying to steal the identity of the game that actually needs to have identity much more. Pushing towards the visuals, it's more of the same 3DS Pokemon games looking funky shenanigans. Nice looking landscapes and an overworld that looks good. It's not charming like the GBA and DS era, but it's a different type of good. In dungeons, the terrain is just a little bit more readable, and hallways taking up less of the screen for more visibility. The mons themselves appear to be scaled a bit better, although clipping still technically does exist, but at the end of the day, it doesn't impact the game really that much, so it's a fun fact if anything. Like the triggering fact for me being Froakies' dumb bouncing movement just being a massive distraction, really making me regret having it as a partner, like in the footage that you see now. So of course, that leads us to the part that you've been anxiously waiting to tie the knot on, being our dungeon visibility, as we are in dire need of fixing the visibility issues Gates had. So to build on our picture once again, PMD1 offered a sightlines of 9x6 tiles, PMD2 with its 11x7 for great eye work, where Gates with its horribly zoomed in camera and tilted camera angle provided us with a safe 5x5 with several tiles poking off in random directions, hiding lots off screen, making it much more harder to see what's going on through the screen just being much more cramped. Finally, with Super, we sadly still have the tilted camera angle that makes the outer columns up top easier to see and the ones below much harder, but for what matters, our normal sized mons grant a simple 7x6 board with the upward tiles opening up by 2, where our gigantic Pokemon have a 7x6 but zoomed out to show a much larger supply of cutoff tiles, which in practicality means there's more to work with, thankfully correcting the biggest issue the previous game had, which is where we round out the section. It's just positives and nothing more. As for the plot, things are on the up, and it's summarized a bit like this. Once again, for the 4th time, you are a human being brought into the Pokemon world to save it. You, as always, wake up knowing your name and that you are a human. Before you can really think, you're approached by 3 dudes who just want to kill you, and before the first dungeon, you make your problems someone else's. After the 2 of you successfully flee, Nuzleaf tries his damnedest to go home, but considering you're homeless and a child in this world, he essentially adopts you, so now you're able to simply exist. With the new living arrangements, you get enrolled to the village's school, but before then, you're introduced to your partner, someone who's self-aware of how annoying they are as the town's troublemaker, being a character with ambition eventually bound for success. Once they run off, you wander into an ongoing situation that turns into a simple rescue op that of course you alone do, and easily succeed at. The next day you join the school, and oh wow, there's a bunch of people you've already met. And to summarize this arc, you become besties with your partner after the rough patches in the class field trips, you rescue the true villain of the game so it can go off to ruin the TCG meta, you and your partner join the Expedition Society as junior members, be the heroes in the rescue of your fellow classmates from LARPers pretending to be a Giratina, have to tag along on a random escort mission so Nuzleaf can see the forbidden peak of a mountain that has foreshadowing, but most importantly, this bit from the rescue team duology returning. Through this arc and the impending doom of those hooligans from earlier being threats, your main duo makes the brave step to simply run into a new town and start over, where at your destination, you're able to properly join the Expedition Society to help in the task of filling out the world map that you never end up doing, as you're doing a bunch of busy work before getting dragged into a world-ending threat that's going about stoning legendaries. You take a fun little adventure where you learn that your scarves actually have magic voodoo that makes you evolve sometimes, and Entei is just Entei. He's actually about to be the next stoning victim, so of course you go to save him, but it's already too late. And now Crocodile's sus for being spotted at the crime scene, as if he wasn't a paid actor, where the game can finally hit its massive tone shift that makes you suffer from whiplash, as of course the sussy individual is bound for your old village, where you get proper directions from the guy who absolutely, surely, definitely doesn't have ulterior motives. You reach the top and wow, the plot's looking very convenient. A barrier that only a human can break, water inside that can unstone Pokemon. It's almost too good to be true. But between the crook showing his face and 2 cats that are here to stand around, who really needs to think straight when peer pressure is all you need? Who needs red flags when they show up? Obviously we do. So yeah, Nuzleaf was secretly the bad guy and Crocodile isn't getting his paycheck. So Yveltal just shows up and delivers you a Pokemon the first movie session where they trap so big-brained your friends weren't safe either, being the perfect place to save the game. So now with basically all hope lost and what remains essentially being targets, your journey continues in hell, where you just gotta have hope, huh? Yeah, now we're playing Danganronpa. Eventually you're able to meet back with your friends, and that's shortly before the residents of this place fucking consume them, where they presumably go to Super Hell, or possibly Chicago. But with new escorts, you head towards freedom with a giant hole in the sky, where your new friends sacrifice themselves so you can re-alive yourself and head home to psychological torture, where one of the 3 bad guys out for your head is spotted and defects from your side, while one of your school friends becomes the traitor, but not actually. Following your guide, an oopsie was made because they were given information that would lead to the doom of all 3 of you. Regardless, the trap fails as Ampharos drops the best line in the game, and Celebi, who shows up for the first time, decides to save everyone with some teleportation nonsense, where now you hold the W key towards the Tree of Life, having your confrontation with the big bad, sit through the evolution cutscene, and seize the day. That is until all the evil energy just causes the tree to fly away, where you fail to board it. No matter though, as all the Pokemon that can are in unison in trying to delay the tree's escape, while Arceus just beams you up there to sit through the evolution cutscene once again, for some unnecessary reason, where you finally confront Dark Matter, which, like the last game, is just a bundle of all the world's negative emotions and shit, as its energy pulls the planet towards the sun itself to truly end the world. You obviously end up whipping him in battle, but your hope is too much, so it needs to out-despair you, stoning literally everyone except the 2 of you. Nobody is allowed to survive. But through some very subtle hinting that hope never dies out, the day is obviously saved, where Dark Matter has finally been put to rest for the 2nd time. So as the game closes, we of course need a big lore dump, and it's the fact that you have stopped Dark Matter in a previous time, alongside your partner, who turns out to be a reincarnation of Mew, who is also responsible for some of the failsafes in this world for when Dark Matter would inevitably return, as even with the previous victory, it wasn't exactly stopped. So this time, your memories were wiped, and all that needed to be done differently was just simply accepting Dark Matter, before killing him. So with that, your partner just adioses out of this world, and now we can finally celebrate the ending. Let's go, baby! So yeah, let's just ignore the loose end of a former human still being in the world. Surely that won't cause any issues. Well, based on previous games, it should. Heading into the post-game, an undefined amount of time has passed, and obviously you're still alone since we need a narrative here. So you get tipped off about a PMD4 reference the game does its damnedest to make clear, where you're informed of Mew's whereabouts for another goose chase. That includes in you actually meeting the damn cat, although crushed in the fact that it's not the same one that was once your partner. But they randomly end up taking a liking to you, so they end up replacing your partner for a while. As you adapt to this new life, a lot of plot happens off screen, followed by Mew getting abducted, and the ransom letter just ends up being nothing short of bait, as the confrontation with Nuzleaf and co. simply bringing the ultimate test of your resolve of not wanting to lose yet another friend, which somehow this friendship being valuable thing with your scarf as a sacrifice ends up being enough to bring your partner back from the other side, where the game just kind of ends, where at the end it's just yet another solid PMD plotline, strengths with its standard hope despair plot alongside a better implementation of the whole moving on without your bestie thing the Gates post-game had, and world building, although it's questionable why there's only one properly returning location, with potentially 2 more through technicality, none of which happen to be towns, the most iconic part of the continent. The game sees yet another positive with its tone from childhood innocence to stopping the complete extinction of the Pokemon world, just ends up being a great all gas and cut brakes escalation that's pretty swell. When the negatives roll in though, it's usually just the pacing of the plot, Act 1 feeling like it takes way too long with not enough plot build for Act 2. Meanwhile, Act 2 itself has the slow start into the full sprint once the story takes its focus on the stoning incidents. The other issue is how little the other characters really get in terms of character building, where your fellow classmates and even the townspeople of Serene Village feel good, granted even if some of them have lacking screen time. It ends up contrasting pretty poorly with the Expedition Society, who really just get an intro scene and not much else in terms of character building, which ends up as a bit of a shame for people who are essentially your brothers in arms. That alone is already raising the bar, but when only Archon and Ampharos really feel like they hit the bar of where these characters should be, it's a bit of a letdown. Like, even for characters that aren't intended to have growth, hearing the same Swirlix food jokes just gets pretty old quickly. But yeah, that's all. The story is one last positive to round things out on. So gamers, it's time to say goodbye to Mystery Dungeon. At the end, Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon is a fitting end to what we see as PMD now. If we never got another new game to follow but only remakes, it'd honestly be a completely acceptable yet slightly disappointing ending for this logical conclusion. As simply one-upping this world-hopping adventure featuring 720 different Pokemon, 122 dungeons, the most climactic plot Pokemon could possibly ever have, and references galore, that would be a damn near impossible task. The game is absolutely cram-packed with content, but fellas, get this. Playing said content is actually good, just like the mechanics, ease of recruitment, and the general streamlining of the game that treats your time like a more valuable resource to make the game's difficulty more appealing. Really stacking up to overshadow the bummer the team building side of things can be, alongside the game having a finite amount of proper content, despite how long that string of content unravels far into the postgame. All for a damn fine time. Finally, gamers, we're in for the reviews, and to start from a scale of 1 to 5, it's a 4, plugging in perfectly to an unorganized list this, since directly comparing game quality like that was the most impossible task ever. For a recommendation on to play or not, it's a yes. It's almost always a yes. It's time to stop asking. I don't even have anything direct to say about the game here. It's its own thing, and it does that pretty damn well. Finally, bringing in my personalized recommendation, where I ask, who's ready to hear yes once more? Yeah, act surprised, the game that's typically hard on average, that's super straight to the point and found ways to make the downtime valuable, wasn't gonna have a positive reaction. Anyways, gamers, that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and until next time! You know, I'm glad we never got an Explorers of Sky remake. Imagine needing to bring that game's art style in line with the 3D games. The models are one thing, but changing Grovil's banging artwork to this disgusting creature would be absolutely heartbreaking. I don't know, would you be content with that? Leave a comment down below and tell me if so. Personally, I'd be more annoyed that we would never see Darkrai's legs ever again. How else is he supposed to aura farm?